Hi, I'm Bruce Williams. Welcome to Chamber Chats. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. I would like to begin by acknowledging, as always, that I live and work in the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. This program is made possible through the support of Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union, and we are here, as always, in the studios of Czech Television for this recording. Part of the things that I have the privilege of doing is working with people on a regular basis who are decision makers, who are leaders. And there's one in particular who I think is very much misinterpreted by a lot of people, and I wanted to talk with her about that today. She is the mayor of the city of Victoria, and she is Lisa Helps. Mayor, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, good afternoon. You're not the first person who's wanted to do a podcast for that reason. And so maybe if I ever write a book, I'll call it Misinterpreted.
Or it could be your nickname, Misinterpreted.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah, I mean, I wanted to start on that point because I have, as I said, the privilege of working together with you on some committees and some other things, and a lot of us see how hard you work. But we also hear a lot of criticism from people who see that you represent the decisions of a council, right? Council makes decisions. You have to represent that, whether you agree with it or not. How delicate is that whole balance of things to do?
That's part of the role of being a statesman, or I guess in this case, stateswoman. Our role is as a decision maker, but as the mayor and as chair of the board, my job is to represent the decisions that council makes. Often I agree, but I don't always, and that's part of when you put on this role, when you're elected to this job, you have to wear the cloak, and you have to hold up all the responsibilities that the role entails, not just your own personal opinion sometimes.
You're a person who has a breadth of knowledge and a work ethic that's pretty much incomparable. I don't know of a lot of people who work as hard as you do, yet you at the same time, you have your hands and your mind involved in so many things. You blend them all together in a way that's quite unique. How exhausting is that? Because I know how hard you work.
Yeah, well, it's too exhausting to do it for 12 years in a row, which is why I'm capping off at 8 years to work at the pace and velocity that I do. And to carry that on for another 4 years, it would just be too much. I'm an overachiever. There's nothing that I do where I don't kind of just throw my whole self into it, which, is sometimes exhausting, not only for me, but for others as well. I think you don't often hear politicians accused of being moving too quickly. It's, government moves too slowly. And I think, yeah, it's exhausting, but it's also rewarding. And so many people that I work with in this community just give so much, and including energy and support to me and to the work that we're doing.
The chamber, as the voice representing business, has that mandate to represent business, to advocate, to consult on policy. And I think another of the misinterpretations of you in particular is that people don't understand how business savvy you are and how much you do to support business all the time. A lot of people don't get that, right?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know who those people are. They may be people who aren't really working in business, maybe, or I don't know, because from the very beginning of taking on this role, and this was before you were in your current role, I realized that I was meeting with the chamber and DVBA and UDI, and then I realized they were all having one-on-one meetings with each other as well. And I thought, oh, that's a lot of meetings. Let's just bring everyone together into this one space. And so we've been doing that since 2016, having monthly meetings. And during the early days of the pandemic, it was 3 days a week. I was on the line with all those folks. So yeah, I don't know if that's a misinterpretation or a misinterpretation of a misinterpretation, in that I think most people who run businesses and who work in businesses in the city and the region know the support that I have for them and for their work and for their workers and their family members. And, as you know very well, I don't see business and community as separate. I don't think that there is necessarily a business community. I think there are a lot of hardworking community members who run some really good businesses in our city and in our region. So yeah, I can't speak to whether that's a misinterpretation or not, but I think of myself sometimes as a political entrepreneur. So I like to think that I've got a pretty good business sense.
Well, you're pretty fluent in business, and I think part of that comes down to your understanding that the wise use of tax dollars that come largely from business is part of your mandate.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that every dollar that we take in, because of the limited way that municipalities have to raise revenue, which is mostly property taxes, utility fees, and parking, that every dollar needs to be spent wisely, and every dollar needs to be considered carefully. I do think that municipalities need different revenue raising opportunities. Imagine what we would be able to do if, for example, we got 1% of the PST that's spent in Victoria, if 1% came back to the local government to reinvest in local goods and services. So but we have the system we have. It dates back to 1867, but yes, absolutely, the prudent use of tax dollars and to deliver services that people want and need. I take that very seriously.
Yeah, this chamber, as well as others, are going to be taking a look at the overall tax structure as it has been in place for so long. This is not something in the municipal purview, but income tax federally, of course, was put in place to support the war efforts, 1914 to 1918, and it never went away. So we need to take a look at how all this stuff works out. But I just want to go back to the misunderstanding in some cases. A lot of people took on bike lanes as something that they had great opposition to. They didn't quite understand it. That's a bit of a lightning rod of attention for you, because even once in a while you still hear some comment about, yeah, well, they're building bike lanes instead of doing something else. That's all a part of future-proofing a community. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, first of all, Victoria didn't invent bike lanes. We also didn't invent two-way bike lanes on one-way streets. Ottawa, Montreal, other cities have the same kind of infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, bike lanes, it's interesting. I think that is probably the thing that people associate most with me. And obviously it was not my decision. It was a council decision, and really the work of our hardworking staff that have built the bike lanes. But this is part of the challenge of leading, because you have to tend to and think about what's necessary now, but also you have to think about 30 years from now, when the city of Victoria has 30,000 more residents and no more geographical space for those people to fit into. And we're sure going to need to find ways for people to move around other than in a car. And I think that the biggest misinterpretation of bike lanes is that when people who haven't been riding because they're afraid, or because they don't want their kids to be on their bikes by themselves, or because for whatever reason, when they leave their cars at home, what that does is it creates more parking, more road space, more vehicle lanes for people who can't ride a bike, who don't want to ride a bike, and who will never ride a bike. And so the thing about the bike lanes that I like is it's really kind of an ecosystem-based approach to transportation planning.
Well, you're a
Sorry, and that
cyclist.
sounded academic. Yes, people hated the bike lanes and now they like them, and I'm happy. That's academic.
Okay, there we go. I mean, you're an avid cyclist. I'm a cyclist. Amanda's a cyclist. I ride my bike to the office when I can, so I understand that. And the bike lanes do work for me. I think that's kind of a cool thing. Something else that's popped up in the last little while, certainly during the pandemic, but it existed before that, is what I want to talk about next, and that is the issue of public safety. Our guest on the Chamber Chat today is Lisa Helps, the Mayor of Victoria. So, Mayor, you and I have been in a number of conversations, as of so many people, about the public safety factor that's popped up, especially in the core. I've been one of the people that are saying that in the case of media, for example, they pay too much attention to the crime and violence and not enough attention to the root cause of all that, which is housing and mental illness. That's where that's all at. But what's the shift been in the attitude and the work toward public safety?
Well, I think this is one of the biggest misinterpretations in the city, not bike lanes and not whether or not I'm business friendly or not, but the fact that this is seen as a Victoria problem. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if people maybe with pandemic, they haven't traveled to other cities. Maybe that's actually the case, but I'm the co-chair with the Mayor of Kelowna of the BC Urban Mayors Caucus. And this, public safety issue, the lack of care for people who have mental health, addictions, brain injury, it's not a Victoria problem. My colleagues across urban British Columbia face this every single day in their downtowns as well. And the answer is complex, but we have to get at the root causes. Otherwise, we're just going to keep spending more money on police, more money on bylaw, more money on parks cleanup. And what's really at issue, and you hit the nail on the head, is there are the most vulnerable people in our communities who are left outside without proper care, without proper health supports. And sure, there are also people who are actual criminals who come and prey on them, and or who kind of pose as people who are homeless or struggling in order to get into some of the housing sites and so on. So we know that happens, but that is absolutely the minority case. The majority of the problem is that there has been decades of neglect of people who, for any stretch of the imagination, shouldn't be outside. They should be inside somewhere where they're getting the care and support they need so that they can deal with their trauma or kick their addiction or yeah, it's just, and again, this is the situation across urban British Columbia.
Yeah, and I meet on a regular basis with other chamber CEOs across the province, and you're exactly right. They're all facing the same thing in their centers. And one of the pieces, of course, that's a part of creating that stability is to help someone better manage their mental health or their addiction. If they have stable housing, that's a much easier thing to do for them because they're safe and they're in a place that they can best live. How much support from the province and the federal government is needed now to make this more robust?
I think it's not so much a matter of support, it's a matter of the money and the programs rolling out quickly enough. So, for example, we know that there's money in this year's provincial budget for complex care housing. And the province worked very hard all summer to put together a program. The BC Urban Mayors Caucus and some of our staff at our municipalities were involved in that. We just need the rubber to hit the road. We need the announcements to be made. We need the places to be open. We need the programs to be started. So I think there's political will at the provincial level, at the federal level, to see a new minister of mental health and addictions named federally sends a signal that this is something that everyone understands. It's just sometimes that the rollout takes too long. And in the meantime, the problems on the ground are compounding, and the public discourse around it is really, I would say, denigrating the situation.
So we're talking here about managing current priorities and issues, if you will. How do you balance that with future priorities and things looking and doing forward thinking and forward planning? How do those two balance?
Bruce, that's a great question. That's probably one of the most difficult parts of my job, because most of the input that we receive from the public is about right now, what people do or don't want right now. And it's really important as a person who represents the public to be responsive to that. And at the same time, that does sometimes put me and potentially council, but I'll only speak for myself, probably mostly me, at odds sometimes with members of the public. So, for example, one of the big things that we have on the agenda right now is missing middle housing, and basically that's a proposal to rezone the entire city, all of our neighborhoods, to basically make it as easy as it is to build a single family home, to build townhouses or houseplexes. And that is a very big future focused decision. And there may be some people who don't want their neighborhood to change, who don't want single family homes to be no longer the default. And it would be very easy to go in that direction. But if we do that, if we look only at the present in that regard, we're not going to have the kind of city that anyone's going to want to live in 20 years from now, or that anyone's going to be able to afford to live in. Right now, it is easier to build a $2 million home than it is to build a home that sells for $700,000. And that is the truth. And that is a problem. And so that's one example where looking to the future is just, it's so necessary, but it's difficult. Bike lanes is another example. We have to be looking 20 years down the road. Free transit for youth, that's another one. Looking down the road, and yeah, it's that part is exhausting. I always have to explain, I'm talking about 20 years from now, not tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah, and that future planning also is in consideration of things like infrastructure, because sometimes you hear about municipalities who have not kept up with keeping their water pipes and their sewer pipes and everything up to date, and they suddenly get into a crisis where Kevin Murdoch, the mayor of Oak Bay, was talking about this on this podcast, that you have a sudden leak of a pipe someplace on a street, and it might cost you $75,000 to dig that up, repair the pipe, and put the stuff back in place, whereas to do the entire city block would be like $500,000. So that expenditure is out of alignment. In what kind of condition is Victoria's infrastructure now, and has there been diligence toward keeping it up to date?
This is, I think, one of the best kept secrets of the last 8 years. If you look at the annual report that we get every year from our chief financial officer about the state of Victoria's infrastructure, the state of Victoria's infrastructure reserves, we've done a really, really good job since 2014 and before that, but really diligent efforts since the time that I took over as mayor. Our reserves are in good shape. We've got infrastructure plans, we've got pavement plans, we've got asset management plans, and we've got almost all of our infrastructure is fully funded in terms of There are some pieces that we're still needing to put a bit more attention to, but in terms of, we don't have a massive infrastructure deficit. We're going to be able to take care of our infrastructure. We've been saving, our reserves are in really healthy shape. Our investments are in really healthy shape. And that is the stuff that no one sees. You see bike lanes, you see public safety issues, you see new housing going up, but you don't see that quiet behind the scenes work that we've been doing. Again, part of setting the table for the future is making sure the city's finances are in good stead, and they really are.
Yeah, that's a good business plan, is what that comes
It's
down
a
to.
good business plan.
Well, I think next we need to talk about amalgamation. Our guest is Lisa Helps, the Mayor of Victoria, on this week's Chamber Chat. So, Mayor, how many times a week does somebody bring up the amalgamation question with you?
Well, now the question is the Citizens Assembly really going to happen? That's the question that I get more often than not. And my answer is, I hope so. We've certainly done our work. I mean, COVID threw a big wrench into it, but at the very least, there should be a process that both taxpayers in Saanich and Victoria agreed to or asked for at the last election, which is, should Victoria and Saanich amalgamate? That is now in the province's hands. It's getting mightily close to the next election to start such a citizens assembly. So I guess we'll have to see what the minister decides in either later this year or in the new year.
Yeah, because a lot of elected officials don't really put a lot of value in amalgamation. Many people think it's going to save money. It probably won't. I mean, no municipality is going to have less number of employees. The only thing that would probably be less of is mayors, quite honestly, because the councils still would have to represent a region on a ward system basis or something like that. So it's an interesting conversation depending on who you talk to. There's something called the 3.0 strategy for the city of Victoria. Can you just kind of give us a brief outline of that and where it's at right now? Oh, there it is. Look at that.
There it is, top of my pile, Victoria 3.0. So that's Victoria's economic recovery plan out of the pandemic, and again, looking forward for the next 20 years. And the mission statement of Victoria 3.0 is to build an inclusive, low carbon economy. So that means high value, high paying jobs that are going to basically turn the tide on climate change. Among many other things. The thrust of Victoria 3.0 is twofold. The immediate is to support our businesses coming out of the pandemic. So the patio strategy came out of Victoria 3.0, and that's here to stay. But also bigger initiatives like the Center for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies, or COAST, an ocean and marine innovation hub cluster to really pull together everyone working in the ocean and marine sector here in British Columbia and in some ways across Canada, and making sure that Canada does a much better job at growing the ocean and marine economy for the 22nd century. So those are just the other big piece out of Victoria 3.0 is the Arts and Innovation District, which is for the north end of downtown. And John Stavel's project there at Capital Iron is starting to bring that alive. So Victoria 3.0, we had a presentation last week from David Fulbrook and his crew, who are building a new hotel at the corner of View and Blanchard.
Yeah, the Montrose building.
Yeah, the Montrose building, that's right. And they referenced Victoria 3.0 in their application to the public that night. And it occurred to me that Victoria 3.0 it's a number of things. One is it's a state of mind. Two is it's a place, and three is it's the future of the city. So I feel really proud of that plan, really excited about it, and it's starting to take hold, not just here, but word is trickling out.
Yeah, council has approved that hotel project and has also approved the Chard project on Broad Street. It's called the Ducks building, but it's the one across from Robinson's Outdoor. So yeah, these transformations are happening to be responsive to the fact that we need hotel rooms. We don't have enough hotel rooms here for when the economy comes back on the tourism side. What motivated you to seek office in the first place? Because a lot of people like me see you doing what you do every day and go, man, that's not for me. I'm not going there. What was your motivation to seek office, though, in the first place?
Well, my motivation to run for council, when I ran for council, I had started and was running an organization called Community Microlending, which makes small loans to people who want to start small businesses but don't qualify for credit at a bank. So I was doing that, and I started that organization and saw what was possible by bringing people together and kind of organizing around a shared vision. And once Community Microlending was off to a good start, I thought, well, what else could I do that would kind of be in service of community and again, organize people around a vision? And so I ran for council, and I was elected. And then I sat at the council table, and in my 3 years on council, I saw City Hall as a place where if you came with a good idea, you'd get a maybe or a no, rather than a, oh, that's awesome. How can we help? How can we make that happen? And so I ran for mayor to help unleash Victoria's potential. And that was actually the name of our first economic action plan. It was called Making Victoria Unleashing Potential. And that's why I sought to become the mayor, to make City Hall into a place that people can come with a good idea. And the answer is yes. And how can we help you?
I mean, your name standing alone is a call to action. Lisa helps.
Yeah,
Best name
that's
ever.
right.
Um, what would you think is the best part of being mayor? Like, what do you enjoy the most?
The best part of being mayor is really to be able to work with so many people from so many different organizations and so many different settings in so many different ways to move the city forward. So you and I know because we meet together regularly over business matters. So that's great to be able to do that. I meet with the folks from the nonprofit sector, from the arts sector, from the social sector, just about, the best thing about this job is, basically when you call a meeting, people come because it's the mayor calling the meeting.
Yeah.
And there's a real motivation to work together to get things done. That's been my most satisfying for me, is the kind of relationships that we've built. And you could see that and feel that right at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything fell apart, we had those relationships to rely on right away. And that the relationship-based nature of the work is, for me, the most satisfying part.
What's been the most surprising thing about being mayor? What did you not anticipate?
COVID-19.
Okay, good answer. Yeah, that's been a huge surprise. I know that you took yourself off social media too. I thought that was a pretty brave thing to do and a smart thing to do. That was unfortunate, but that whole disrespect online must have been a little surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't surprising, unfortunately. The thing that and we could do a whole podcast on just this, the thing that I find most distressing is thinking about young women or Indigenous people or people of color or Black people, who look at how not just myself, but myself and other female politicians, other politicians of color are treated online, and think, why would I ever put my name forward? And that is a real problem, because just like in our businesses, when we have diversity, we're more productive, we're more profitable. At our council tables and our board tables, when we have diversity, we're going to make better decisions. And so I don't really care about being attacked on social media. It was annoying more than anything, but what bugs me more is the message that it sends to others. And so I don't know how to overcome that as a community, but I think we really need to turn our minds to it.
We only have about 20 seconds left. What's something that people would be surprised to know about you?
How many tattoos I have.
Okay. It's up to the rest of the world to find that out. Mayor, we appreciate your time. We know how busy you are. Thank you for all the hard work and diligence you put into what you do every day, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Lisa Helps is the mayor of Victoria. I'm Bruce Williams. We'll see you again for another Chamber Chat.